The Democratic Party is fundamentally out of touch with the reality of the looming debt crisis in the United States, as well as the reasons why the war on poverty that we launched in the 1960s has failed.
Welcome and thank you for joining the candidate forum for Congressional District 20. A special election is being held for this seat due to the death of Representative Alcee Hastings in April of this year.
I'm Mike Chairmat. I'm an economist. I used to teach at Barry and at Nova. I worked for a number of government agencies, including the White House Office of Management and Budget. I'm into my second career now. I'm a police officer. I've been patrolling the roads in South Broward County for 11 years. And I believe I'm the only candidate in the race who will tell you that we need a very fresh, new approach to both how we manage and address poverty and our criminal justice system. It turns out that the reason the war on poverty has failed is that you can't just throw money at some of our problems and at the same time provide a relatively weak public school system and expect that everything is okay. You can't just, for example, throw money at the problem and at the same time provide a very burdensome criminal justice system and expect everything is going to be okay. The reason I'm in this race is I believe we need to make fundamental changes in the policies that we use to address these problems. I don't think the Democratic Party is ready to make those fundamental changes. I'm a member of the Libertarian Party, and thanks very much. Obviously, we need to meet our obligations for Social Security and Medicare, but Leonard is right. We need a way for the youngsters to opt out of Social Security and make themselves wealthy in their later years. Look, as far as budget priorities go, my priority is to address poverty and to address criminal justice. But on the budget front, what we should be debating is what we're going to do about a truly looming crisis in this country. Our national debt at the federal government level now exceeds our annual income. We don't know how much more taxing and spending we can engage in before the combination of inflation and our inability to meet our debt payments is going to bring down the federal government. We are looking at a debt crisis in the next few days. We're going to lift the ceiling, but after that, we don't know which year is going to be really the problem year.
How serious do you believe the world's plastic problem is today? And will you support the Break Free from Plastic Act now in Congress?
Thanks very much. No, the bill is actually not structured correctly at all. It doesn't properly distinguish between the various types of plastics and the costs associated with any manufacturing, employing, or cleaning them up. It doesn't do an appropriate job of creating the incentives to minimize the burden on the environment. The right way to go about it, of course, is to somehow calculate what it would cost to clean up the environment and impose that on the various types of plastic. It would be an enormous undertaking. Yeah, I support the idea of government conducting or funding research into this area and then passing it on to the manufacturers and consumers of plastics. Nothing moves the deployment of pollution like the private sector. We have to get the right incentives in place to make markets work the way we want them to.
All right. So if you were in Congress right now, would you vote yes or no for H.R. 4, which is the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act of 2021?
No, Jen. The reason the Lewis Act is problematic is not because it doesn't try to do the right thing. It's because it is at the federal level, and I believe inadvertently creates roadblocks to certain states doing some things that we actually want them to do. A lot of these matters have to be taken care of at the state level.
So question number 4 is, what is your position on qualified immunity for police officers?
Thanks. As a police officer, I feel very strongly about this. As so often is the case, Barbara is exactly right. Qualified immunity has to fall. It will fall. We want the market for police officers to work more like other markets. The primary analogy here is other high liability industries like surgeons are required to obtain insurance to protect themselves in cases of liability. And if an officer is just bad at his job or her job, they're not going to be able to get insurance and they're going to be run out of the industry. And that's exactly how we want it to work. I'm not a big fan of taking care of this at the national level. I think this should be a state by state issue. Thanks very much. No, I don't believe that the approach taken in Texas is appropriate for Texans or for Floridians, but for different reasons. I don't like the idea of pitting American against American. I don't like the idea of criminalizing adjunct roles in the abortion process. Having said all of that, I do believe that when we look back on this issue hundreds of years from now, we will look back on it with horrified embarrassment that abortion has become so prevalent in the United States and in certain democracies around the world. Roe v. Wade, as a technical matter, however you feel about abortion, Roe v. Wade as a technical matter was not settled correctly, and therefore it's likely to fall. The same thing with Casey. And so this is in the certainly next 10 years is going to become a likely issue that's going to have to be faced by states, and every state's going to have to make up their own mind how to deal with it. I think that I'm hoping they come up with more rational ways than Texas did.
Last but not least, Mr. Chairmat.
Thanks very much. It's been a great discussion, but I have to admit I'm very, very disappointed with so much of what I've heard tonight. I truly believe, good intentions notwithstanding, that the Democratic Party is fundamentally out of touch with the reality of the looming debt crisis in the United States, as well as the reasons why the war on poverty that we launched in the 1960s has failed. You cannot throw money at problems and expect that everything is going to be okay when our public schools are awful compared to the rest of the United States and compared to private schools. When you criminalize victimless behavior and create a system where we send people to prison sentences so much longer than the rest of the world, you cannot expect everything is going to be okay with the horrible housing ordinances we have that drive up the costs of living. We need to make fundamental changes. I'm a libertarian. I'm ready to make those changes.